How's everyone doing? Thanks for joining me on my small repair channel. Today's project is on this Weedeater brand push mower. It's probably made by MTD, I'm thinking. And it's got a Briggs & Stratton engine with the plastic carb on it. As you can see, it's got some pretty definitive issues. So we're going to go through them each and see if they're deal breakers or whether or not we can get this thing up and running again. Alright guys, so I just pulled this one out of my shed. It's been in storage for the last year or so, or since last season. Like I said, it's got the Briggs 500E series engine on it. It's missing a gas cap, as you can see. The other big thing, well, a couple more things. It's caked with oil and dirt. I presume that's because of a faulty filler cap there, or somebody overfilled it with oil, which I see all the time as well. The other thing I see here that's probably going to be an issue is why is this tape on here? So I presume it's going to need a new bail cable, and it's actually missing the bail handle as well. There's no handle here to pull this bail cable. So we're going to have to see if I have all these parts, and if I do, then we're going to try and see if this thing is going to run first and see if it has spark and compression, and then we're going to go from there. Alright, so just so happens I actually have a fuel cap for this particular style of machine. So that's good. Alright, take a look at the oil filter or air filter, and that's yuck. Definitely will need a new one. This one has a primer type system. It did have some fuel left in the tank from last year. Before I stored it, I didn't empty the fuel. The oil level is pretty low on this thing. So I think I'm going to just put a little bit of oil in this thing just so see if I can test it. I'm going to check the underside here, see if the blade is bent. The blade definitely looks bent. So the things are stacking up on this thing. I'm gonna try and spin the blade to see if the crankshaft is bent. But before I do that, I'm gonna disconnect the ignition system. Let me put this oil dipstick back in so I don't make a mess if whatever oil's left in here. All right, so the crankshaft is not bent on this thing, but the blade is definitely bent. Take a look at that thing. All right, that side is not so bad. That side's bent. So we could be also looking at a sheared flywheel key. So I'm going to see if this primer system is working. You won't be able to see it on camera here because it's just too dark. In fact, I can't see in there either. So, all right, the primer It does look like it's working, but very minimally. Alright, so let me get some oil to put in there, and then we'll test this thing out. Okay, so I topped up the oil. Now, to get this thing to run, we're going to have to get some sort of system, figure out what's going on here. I presume. I think I know what happened. There's usually basically a post that comes through the center of that, and it goes in here. So it looks like they've tried to rig something up here, then they tried to tape it. So I suspect that, I don't know if this cable works or not, but what we can do as well is I can just I can simulate pulling this by just grabbing some pliers maybe and getting that pulled to see whether or not this thing will even fire up. Because obviously it's going to need a new blade, it's going to need new bail handle, probably a new bail cable, new filter, fresh oil, probably a carb job. I mean, there's quite a bit of work in this thing for probably, if I clean it up and get it looking nice, I might get $100 for it, maybe $120 for it. I don't know, we'll see. Alright, so what I've done is I've actually put a zip tie here to close the gap here, and that basically what that does is it removes the ground. So this part touches this part and grounds out the ignition coil. It also releases the brake on the flywheel. So those two things should get this thing to start. The problem is that to get it to stop, I either have to cut this zip tie, or I can try and choke out the carburetor, or I can remove the spark plug wire from the ignition coil. So okay, so I got a can of quick start here in case that priming didn't work or the fuel is not good and it won't burn. I also have a set of pliers here that I can pull off the ignition coil, or the spark plug wire, to get the ignition to go out. Alright, so let's see what happens. We're getting nothing so far. Spray some quick start in there, see if it'll run on that stuff. Alright, so we got an engine that'll run. Definitely was shaking pretty bad because that blade is going to be out of balance because it's bent all to hell. So I think we have a survivor from an engine perspective. So now again, I gotta just see if I can source some parts here. So I'm gonna go into my hoard, gonna see if I can find a cable, bail cable next, and then see if this cable is any good. I'll have to rig it up maybe, or just replace it with a good used one if I have one. So that's where we're heading with it next. Alright, I got something kind of rigged up here just for now. I don't really like it, but we'll figure it out. I got a bail cable, or a bail handle. And the one thing I don't like is the cable doesn't pull it back all the way back to there. It just goes back to here. So what I'm going to try and do is shorten this cable a little bit, the sheathing. So I'm going to take the cable off by just pushing on the two tabs on this side of that cable, and then it should slide through this way, and then I'll be able to take this cable off, and I'll show you how we can actually shorten the effective length of the actual cable itself, because the cable just seems a little bit too long. So I got the cable off here, this end, And if you actually turn this and loosen this sort of end piece a little bit here, it'll actually spin right off. What that's doing is making this cable shorter because it's making the sheathing longer. Now you're only gonna get maybe half an inch because you need it on there by, you know, a couple turns. So you're gonna gain, that's gaining maybe a half an inch. So we'll see what that does. And if that doesn't work, what I might be able to do is move this piece down that way a little bit and try and see what I can do with that, and that will also make this length a little bit shorter on the cable. All right, I hooked it back up, and it does pull the handle back a little bit, but honestly what we're really trying to do is to engage that lever. You can see how it's moving to the left there. That lever has to move far enough to disengage the ground wire and to also remove the brake from the flywheel. So as long as those two things are happening, that's as far as it really needs to move. So I'm going to go ahead and try it with this new rigged up system to see how this works and see if that's going to work for us. Again, this is a $100 lawnmower, guys. So if this is going to work, I'll probably just clean all this glue off from the duct tape. I'll snip these 3 off and I'll wrap this with some electrical tape, and it won't be perfect, but it'll be usable. I'm not going to put on a $25 cable on a $100 lawnmower if I can get away with it. So I'll see if I can get it running this way. There's still a little bit of fuel left. It's last year's fuel at least, so it might need to have a carb clean. Alright, so I'm going to spray some carb spray here into the carburetor, or it's a quick start actually. Alright, so our bail cable and handle looks like it's going to work, or sort of fix here. Next thing we're going to need to do is source a blade. I'm going to see if I have some spare blades that will fit onto this thing, and so it doesn't shake all over the place. And then the last thing we're going to do is probably just get into this carburetor and see if we can't get this thing running on its own. Alright guys, so I've had this thing sitting here for a little while, maybe a couple hours, and you can see it's left a puddle of oil on my garage floor. So I looked underneath and it was wet in this one corner, and as you can see it's wet right here on the top side on this corner. So I'm gonna have to try and scrape off some of this oil, clean this area, and then let it sit overnight and then see where that dirty oil is coming from that I put inside the motor. And we'll come back tomorrow and we'll try and figure out where this thing's leaking oil. This one might not be a survivor after all. Alright, so it's just a couple minutes later. Definitely I know where the oil is coming from now. So if you recall earlier in the video, this engine had a bent blade, and when I did get it fired up, it was shaking like a leaf in fall. Okay, so obviously the person who had this previously, when they hit something, they just kept running it with that bent blade for some reason, and it has definitely cracked the block. So just follow my screwdriver here It's actually cracked all the way up here. It's cracked straight across here. And guess where the leak is coming from? Right over in this corner. And it is cracked. It's going to be harder to see here with the light, but it's cracked right down here. So this engine is toast, guys. Unfortunately, you can't win them all. So we have a usable deck that I can transplant an engine onto. I will save some of the parts off of this thing, the muffler, the housing, the recoil, the fuel tank, the fuel cap, and probably the carburetor. I'm not sure just yet. We'll have to get into it, see how bad it actually is. I'll take the flywheel key out, take all the hardware, any of the screws and stuff, because this is the stuff that nickels and dimes you to death when you're looking for parts for this stuff. I mean, the air filter housing for sure. I need an air filter housing for another machine, unfortunately not the same exact one, but this is the kind of stuff I save all the time, because that's what's going to help me to fix up stuff in the future for fairly cheap. Definitely save the ignition coil and maybe even the spark plug, because we know it's a working spark plug. So it's not a complete loss, guys, but we did do a lot of this work. I mean, the stuff here on the handlebars and stuff, that is still going to be useful, because when I throw a new engine on here, I'm gonna need a set of bars and cable and a brake band, a handle up here. So some of this wasn't a complete loss anyways, but can't save them all, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button down below, show me a little love, and if you're not already a subscriber, consider doing so. I post videos like this just about once a week, and hopefully you enjoy the content. So until our next project, take care.